Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter, and today I'm going to show you what's in the December Smart Art Box. I'm a little behind because of the holidays, but I'm very excited because I took a peek of what was in here, and I think this is going to be a really fun box for a lot of people. So, this video is brought to you by smartartbox.com. You can sign up and subscribe and get a box of art supplies delivered right to your door every month, and it's always a surprise, so it's a lot of fun. If you're not a gambler, though, you can always go and look and see what they have for past boxes. So you got a couple options there. So opening it up, we have a brochure, and what this does, as in every box, it tells you a little bit about the process that you're going to learn, the technique, which is gelatin printing. It'll tell you about the products that come in the box, and it'll also give you a sample project that you can try at home. I really like these boxes for like homeschooling, things like that, where you're trying to pull together an arts curriculum but you don't really know where to start. So I would totally recommend this for like a homeschooling family or homeschooling group to chip in on. I think it'd be a lot of fun, very useful. So what we have first is a brayer. So when you do gelatin printing, you need something to apply a thin coat of ink or paint on your plate, and this is wonderful for that. You want to make sure you get something with a soft, you don't really want foam. It's good to have something that's like a soft rubber so you don't waste a lot of paint and you can wipe it clean. You're also going to need some paint, and acrylic paint works really well. The stuff from the craft stores work really well, and these are the actual Gelli art acrylic paint, which I'm excited to try because I haven't used it. I typically use the inexpensive craft store bottled paint for this. It works very well, so that's kind of nice too, because if you really love it and you want to get some more colors, you don't have to spend a fortune to get paint that's going to work really well with this. You'll need a surface to work on, and they included some stamping cards from Strathmore, and they are a really smooth white card, and the nice thing about it being really smooth is that you're not going to have like your image skipping. You want a nice smooth paper for printmaking, so you get a really nice complete print, and that would be good for stamping too if you don't use all of those up and you want to use them with your stamps. And last but certainly not least, we have a Gelli printing plate. Now you can of course do any of these techniques I'm going to show you today with a homemade gelatin plate, which you would just make with unflavored gelatin, and I do have a video on how to do that if you want to go that route. But I had recently, not even that recently, I started collecting these plates when they became available, and I love the convenience of storing them compactly, and they're a lot of fun, and just wipe them off to clean them when you're done. So I really like these. So to get started, you want to grab a piece of paper and set that down on your workspace, and then you're going to put your Gelli printing plate right on top. And putting the paper down first is just going to keep you from getting a mess on your workspace, and it's also going to keep your plate from shifting around too much. If you want to tape the paper down to your table, you can. In fact, I think I'll do that just to you know, eliminate the chance of that moving while I'm working. I also recommend that you have a large area to work on, because once you start printmaking, you're going to have a lot of prints that you need to set down to dry. So there are some other things you're probably going to want as well, and I'm going to show you some of my favorite tools. And the first one would be paintbrushes or these like silicone tip tools. You want something that's got a soft end so that you can like draw in the paint. Anything that is not sharp. You wouldn't want to use like a bamboo skewer or a fork or anything that's like really sharp. You want something that's a little soft so you don't damage the surface. If you get a scratch on this plate, you can flip it over and use the other side, but if you scratch it up, it's going to be permanently there. And these here, if you're on a budget, these work really great because they are sold for nail decorating, like gel nail decorating, but they're ideal and they're like identical to the really expensive art supply ones. So that's a really great product to have. And I like to put everything out handy so that I can access it. So I am cheating a little bit and grabbing some other supplies that didn't come in the kit, but found objects like onion bags and you know, anything textured packaging, anything like that you can use to make prints. So I've got some stencils here and some masks that I want to use. These I recently picked up on sale, and I thought those would be kind of fun to use on the Gelli plate. Gotta pop the little centers out first. And then, so stencils and masks are great to have. Another thing that's really great to have are foam stamps. And these are usually sold where like kids art supplies are sold. They're great because they often have some really cool designs. They're soft, they're not going to hurt anything. And what I like about these as opposed to rubber stamps for this project is that if the paint dries on this, you can wipe it off. The designs are really bold, but if paint dries on a rubber stamp, you might ruin the stamp. So I'd go for these inexpensive foam stamps, and you can always buy fun foam and make your own for this purpose. And something else that I use, and I'm not sure if I have any all ready to go, is sometimes I'll emboss paper, like I'll emboss cardstock, and I'll use that for my printmaking as well. So I might see if I still have a stash of those around. You can also cut up spatulas, like rubber silicone spatulas, and make your own little texture tools. So you don't have to run out and buy any of these things. Look around your house, look around your recycling bin, and find things that you can make textures on your plates with. So without further ado, I'm actually going to speed up the video, and we're going to make a bunch of prints. Don't worry, speeding it up isn't going to affect you being able to see what I'm doing here, because it is a very time-consuming process, but it's a fun process, and I do hope you give it a try. So without further ado, let's get this show on the road.
Make sure that you have all your supplies handy when you begin printmaking so you don't have to stop and go hunt for things as you're working. So first you want to squirt some paint on your plate, but I put way too much down, and that's why it's kind of slipping over the edge there. No problem though, it's still going to be fine, but try not to put quite so much down when you're doing your print. So here we're going to do our first print. I put paper over the back so I didn't get paint on my hands, and there you can see how that one came out. There's going to be enough paint left over that you can get what's called a ghost print, and so what I'm doing is taking a fresh card, putting that down and rubbing over the back again, and I like the way these ghost prints come out better because you get a really pretty fun effect on your second pull. I had plenty of paint left on my brayer to give my pad another coat, and now I'm just pressing on a piece of embossed cardstock to impress a design there. You could do the same thing with a bubble wrap that was in our Smart Art box to leave a texture. Anything textured you have will work for this technique, and here you get another beautiful print. Since that print nearly cleaned off my printing plate, I decided I would switch colors, and I decided to go with reds and pinks, and I'm using the Gelli art paint that came with my kit, and also some craft acrylics, and they were very compatible, so that is great news. And again, I'm spreading it out on the Gelli pad, and then I'm putting down some gear stencils and some number stencils. Now sometimes you get a good impression if you have a lot of open space on your stencils, and other times you get more of a chunky, bold impression, but we're going to be layering these images, so don't worry if everything doesn't work out just the way you want. I'm using these soft silicone tipped tools to go ahead and draw some squiggles, and then I'm going to pull another print from this ghost image. Please know that you're going to find the hot mess stage is fierce in this type of project, and you're going to get some ugly prints, but don't worry, it's just an opportunity to add another layer. I didn't change the colors too much because I had a lot of red left over, so I am doing some pink and yellow, and I'm just again pressing an old embossed piece of paper down. You can save that embossed paper and use it over and over and over again, so you know, keep recycling. That one didn't give me a great print, but I knew that it would be covered over the next time and there'd be no worries there. Feel free to experiment with having streaky backgrounds or solid backgrounds and see what effects each type of ink application gives you. Now this is a really thin stencil by Patty Tolly-Parrish, who's an online friend of mine, of circuit board print, and then I thought I would also add a few more things to this plate because there was a lot of ink before I pulled the ghost print or the second generation print. Now remember, anytime you think you're going to have some ink squish out the sides, throw a piece of paper down. Now that was an ugly print, but that's okay because I will layer over it. You can use your painty stencils as stamps, just press them down on other parts of the plate if they're still inky. And I don't bother really cleaning my stamps, I just let them dry and call it good. And this I thought looked really interesting because of all the little bits and gobs of paint and leftovers on the plate. So take those happy accidents and run with them. Now since my colors were pretty much cleaned up, I decided to add some magenta, and now I'm using some big foam stamps. And after you like press a foam stamp on your plate, you can stamp it off on any of your cards that you've made for an interesting texture. I wish I could show you my whole table at this point because it is covered up. Now there were some innards of those gear masks that I saved, and these stars are those are a perfect example, and I just laid those down before pulling this print here on the magenta with the scribbly doodles. I'm finding because these new blue gear stencils are thicker, they're not giving me the first generation prints that I like, but again, because I'm layering, I am not worried about it. And something else I like to do is do partial prints. That's where I will take a card that's not that exciting and I will just kind of press part of it down onto the block and kind of just alter different bits of a print. Don't forget you can off-stamp any of your foam stamps or stencils onto cards to get a little mileage out of your paint. So to clear my brayer off, I was just kind of rolling it onto some scrap paper, and then to clear the plate, I'm spraying it with water and just wiping it down. You want to make sure that plate's clean if you're going to switch colors drastically, like I am here with this lime green and white. And again, spreading it out, but letting it be a little bit streaky. And I found this beautiful mask from Simon Says Stamp. It's kind of like a flowery doily. And I am going over that really hideous red background that I had. And look at that. I think that's totally pretty. Now I'm going to layer the ghost print on another background that was a doozy, and hopefully cover up some of that hot mess. And it's not perfect, but it is better. I toned down the red, and that's only 2 layers. We've got more layers to go. So I'm still staying with that same color family of greens and blues and whites, and I am going to just brayer that out. I'm going to leave it a little bit streaky, and this time I'm using some pieces of fun foam that I cut with decorative scissors, and I'm making kind of like a marbled background, and I'm going over another hideous background that I didn't like. And unfortunately, this didn't improve it very much, but at least it's another layer and it's added some interest, and it will be fine when we're all done, I promise you. Since there was still plenty of paint on there, I decided just to smooth it out and throw down a big, bold stencil. Again, it's those thick ones that don't really give me that great of an impression, but I think it's bold enough that it'll be fine. And I really like how I could see some of that red layer through that. And now I'm going to use the ghost print over another background, and we'll see what we get there. And that's just some really yummy texture I think is really pretty. Whatever you do, just don't get discouraged if those first layers are not to your liking. In fact, they're a blessing because it lets you just kind of throw your cares out the window because they can only get better, right? So this next technique I'm going to show you is actually clearing off a brayer right onto a card. So my brayer is loaded with ink. What I'm going to do is just loosely go over a card base with it, and then I end up with this beautiful peeled paint texture. So have fun. There is no right or wrong way. And you can even use the brayer to ink up a stamp and stamp that on something. So really experiment and have fun. Layers is the name of the game, my friends, and I do hope you will experiment. And once you get going, it's really hard to stop. So I had used the foam stamps to press textures into that inked up plate, and now I'm throwing on a couple stencils and pressing down another card, and that's just adding on another layer of abstract shapes. And here I'm doing my technique where I just hit some of the edges of a card to give it a little bit of that color and texture. As you progress building up layers, you may realize that you don't want to cover up everything you've already printed. There may just be a little bit of blah on your card that you just want to add some interest to. So that's where bending your card and kind of pressing it here and there on the plate will just give you a little selective texture and selective color. And it looks really nice, and it lets you control the printmaking a little bit more. I made the mistake of putting too much paint down again, so I decided to pick up some of that paint with a foam stamp and add it to another card that I'd been working on. So this would probably be layer like 4, I think, on this one. But that's, again, another great way to add some selective paint to a design. So I decided, since I had so much paint, that I would use this really dainty mask, and I did a print over a background that I thought was a little too red, so that kind of blocked out a little bit of that red and gave me a kind of a larger blue chunk to work on. And then I wanted to get rid of some of the stark white on this print, and I used the ghost pull of this print to do that same thing. Since I still had a lot of paint on my brayer, all I had to do was go over the block again, and I was all set to do my next print. I really love the selective printing technique, like when I have a really bold stencil and I just want to get a little bit of dash of color here and there, like I kind of do with this these numbers here. I wanted to break up that band of whitish, lightish color there, and that worked really well. And then that set my block off perfectly to do a ghost print, which I am doing on this one here, and that's just going to leave like a film over a previous print, and it just gives it a little bit of color and texture, but nothing too serious. When you're working in layers, you really want to pay attention to the contrast so that you don't end up with mud. So this bright, creamy buttercup yellow is going to work great on top of that purple. So I just kind of pulled a little bit of that color right from the brayer, so I get a choppy, bright pop of color there. So kind of keep that in mind. And similarly, printing this bright yellow over that blue is also going to give me a nice contrast of like cool versus warm. So just kind of think contrast in color, contrast in design, contrast in opacity, and that will help you get a really versatile and pleasing look from your prints. I was feeling like a lot of my prints had gotten too dark with all the layers, so I decided to do a layer of white on my Gelli plate, and then I just put down some bold stencils and then pressed some of these prints down over it to give them some, you know, really bold light areas and graphic areas, any place where I felt like I had a part of the design that was way too dark. So this is where you definitely want to use your selective printing so that you can just kind of pop up certain areas of your design. And I just feel like it gives it a cohesive layer because we started with white. The first layer of our cards were white. They were a white card base. So this just brings you back to basics, brings you full circle, and I feel like makes the whole design process look a little bit more complete. Anytime you layer, you might end up getting more color than you needed and you'll have to backtrack, but please don't let that stop you from experimenting. The more layers of paint you end up with on your cards, the more sturdy they're going to feel and the more luxurious they're going to feel. Now, if you're worried about getting paint on the back or the edges of your cards and it makes you nervous, you can always cut down cardstock to fit the size of your card bases that you plan to use, and that way you don't have to worry if you get ink on the back, paint on the back, because it's going to be hidden when you glue it down to a nice crisp clean card base. This doesn't bother me though. I mean, I don't mind a few paint smudges here and there. I like how that gave it a whitewashed look there, just doing the ghost print on top of a really bold background. You know, just have fun with it. I did feel like I got a little too much white on some of the cards, so I'm going in with some nice shades of blue because I knew that I've used that color already and I know it's going to harmonize all right. And I'm just kind of doing it in very selective areas. And I'll use my fingertips to kind of press the paper into the Gelli plate through the stencil so that I will get a little bit bolder of a design, especially if it's a thicker stencil like those gears or anything that's a little more detailed, because it will need the extra push to make it print really well. And sometimes I just want to put like a frame or just want to have some bold color in an area, and that's what I did there. I did end up putting it too much and I will have to correct that a little bit, but you know, it's easy to do. See, I just cleaned my brayer off of my scrap paper and I put that number stencil down, and I'm going to stencil that or stamp that, print that rather, over that band of darker color just to kind of give it a little bit of a more mellow look. And then if you want it even lighter, you can just push it right into the lighter part of the plate. I like that I don't have a full coverage on this plate, so that whatever I print down is going to give me more of a gauzy effect. And that's something that you can really control with Gelli printing. The more you spread your paint out, the lighter, the more airy or gauzy your print will look, and the more thicker you apply it, the more you'll get that really thick, opaque look. So play with those different characteristics to get the effect that you're looking for. And also, if you have a stencil that seems really specific, when you just print part of it, it doesn't look that specific. And there's my edge technique again. I really love using the brayer directly to the paper just to give it a little bit of a frame or just some raw texture. It just works really well. Just remember, there's really no rules here. Have fun, layer, 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 and then layer a little bit more, and I think you'll be really pleased with the outcome. I have to say that I realize why so many YouTube artists that do gelatin printmaking do not narrate their videos, because after a while it's like, yep, put down a stencil, do some more layering. Put down a stencil, do some more layering. So I hope you found this voiceover somewhat interesting. Otherwise, I guess you could have muted it and just put on some music, because now I see why all the other Gelli printing tutorials are just music. It feels like there's just only so much you could say about layering. So on that note, let's take a look at the final prints now that they're all dry, and you can see how they all came out.
Okay, let's take a look at the finished prints that we did. And hey, if you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments below and I'll help you out as best as I can. But I gotta tell you, the way to learn how to do the Gelli printing and how to layer is just by playing. There are no rules, just have fun, dig around your house, see what you can find, and go for it. So let's just flip through. As you can see, how many prints? 1, 2, 3, there's probably 4 prints on this. I think the more you layer, the more interesting it becomes, and it's fun to see how other colors layer over each other. The prints dry really quickly, so doing these 10 cards, I didn't have to wait for anything to dry. There was always something dry that I could print on. And if you're stuff is fairly dry underneath and you go to layer on top, you're not going to get mud as much as you are going to get overlapping. Now if you do have some transparent layers like this kind of seafoam green color was transparent over the red, you will get a little bit of a muddiness as those semi-transparent colors, you see through those colors into the colors below, but it's still a really fresh and lively look. It's not like when you kind of paint watercolors and you eventually get muddy. You don't get that with the acrylics as much just because they are going to layer really well. And like I said, you can use whatever acrylic paints you have. I find that the ones that aren't super thick work better because they spread out better on the plate. And just, you know, get a good quality brayer. That would be the first thing to invest in after the Gelli plate. You can get by with a foam roller, but you're going to go through so much more paint with a foam roller and you're going to waste a lot. So that would be like, it's kind of, it would pay for itself within a couple of sessions just because it's not getting absorbed with paint. So any of these, look for a either a red or a tan roller on it, and that will tell you it's like the soft red rubber. The black and the clear ones are harder and they're not going to work as well for brayers. So for this purpose anyway. This was a lot of fun. I'm never exactly sure what I'm gonna get when I do these prints, and it's always a lot of fun. And something I figured I could do with these as I needed them is I could take some big foam letter stamps and like stamp hi or hello or thanks right across the center with black, because I did not use any black in any of these, so that would show up really well even on the most crazy looking backgrounds. I would also kind of like, I just finished these up, so I'm going to spread these apart just to let them completely dry. If you do have an issue with any of them kind of like warping a little bit, they are flattening out really well as they dry, so I don't think that's going to be much of an issue. But if you do have that issue, you can always stack them back up. If you're worried that they might be still a little damp, put some wax paper in between them and put a book on top. But the more they dry, the flatter they're getting, so I really don't think that's going to be a problem. I want to thank Smart Art for sponsoring this video today. Go to smartartbox.com if you want to find out more about their fun art boxes and their fun and smart art boxes, and I'll leave links in the video description so you can find that. Please give me a thumbs up if you enjoy these kind of creative play videos, and like I said before, if you got any questions, leave them in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy crafting.